It's the annual PFT Live post-Super Bowl hiatus, which means you get 5 days, hopefully, of PFT PM, hashtag no days off. There's always something to talk about in the NFL, even when it hits kind of a low point. It's not really low. It's just lower than it's been. We've had the Super Bowl reaction. Everybody said what they want to say about Bad Bunny. They'll probably keep saying things about that until next year's Super Bowl halftime show. But the NFL never really sleeps. And even when it does, it sleeps with one eye open. This week, who knows what all is going to happen? We'll be breaking down any and all news as it develops at PFT. And I'll be here to talk about some of the things that are going on or things that we didn't have a chance to get to last week. And I'm going to start with something that happened on Friday after PFT Live went off the air. The NFL sent a memo to all teams crowing about a victory in a grievance that was filed last year aimed at stopping the very effective and entertaining annual NFLPA report cards. Those began in 2023, typically released at the scouting combine with a press conference and insights with methods that were for some the subject of debate. But regardless, it's the only thing that anyone has ever had that creates real accountability for the teams, real feedback for the teams. And we saw how different teams reacted. Some teams, the ones that get it, took the criticism contained in the report cards to heart, like the Broncos. If we need to make improvements based upon the input of our players, we'll do it. Other teams don't like the scrutiny, don't like the criticism, so attack the messenger, attack the message, and ultimately try to defeat the process. And that's what the NFL tried to do. The grievance arose under two separate provisions of the collective bargaining agreement. I'm going to start with Article 39. Article 39 contemplates that the NFL and the NFLPA will do a joint survey at least once every 3 years of the players. The NFL's argument, in a nutshell, was that we already have a system for doing a survey. And the NFLPA doing their own undermines and dilutes because, how many surveys can the players respond to? We need them to focus on the Article 39 survey that is done at least once every 3 years. We can't have any other surveys. Union can't do their own. They have to lock arms with us, the league, and do a survey at least once every 3 years. The biggest flaw in the NFL's argument was, and this comes from the 26-page ruling in the arbitration claim, that the NFLPA has been wanting to do one since 2015, and the NFL has refused. Now, I'm sure the NFL would have its own version of the events, but that's the message that came through in the final ruling. NFLPA has wanted to do it. NFL hasn't since 2015, so there's no problem with the NFLPA doing their own. And even beyond that, the arbitrator found that the argument from the league was not persuasive, that the union can't do their own survey and report cards as it relates to the 32 teams. So even though the memo that the league sent to the teams creates the false impression that they won, and when you read the first paragraph of the memo that the league distributed to multiple members of the media and some put in full on Twitter, it felt like a total victory when you read it. Now, when you got deeper into it, it's like maybe they didn't get a total victory. The truth is they didn't. If anything, they got a hollow victory because the union can still make the report cards. Under Article 39, the attack at the very essence of this annual survey by the union, that lost, period. The NFL whiffed. It was a swing and a miss. Now, the other side of it, this came from Article 51 of the collective bargaining agreement. The NFL prevailed as it relates to this mutual obligation of labor and management as codified in the CBA to curtail criticism, public criticism of each other. And specifically for these purposes, the NFL said, look, by creating these report cards and giving the players a blank check to complain about anything they want to complain about as it relates to the teams, as it relates to the owners, as it relates to other employees of the organization, it violated Article 51. thou shalt not publicly complain, or at least you have to make reasonable efforts to curtail public criticism. So the NFL won on that point. Here's the end result, though, and this is why I call it a hollow victory. The report cards are still going to be created, and they're going to be given to the players. And the members of the union, a couple thousand, maybe more. It's not just the players currently in the league. It's players who aren't employed but are still eligible for union membership because they're trying to become employed. That document's going to go out to many, many, many players. It only takes one to come up with a way to get the document to someone in the media who will then, if that person is willing to fulfill his or her obligation to the audience, blast it out there for everyone to see. This falls squarely within the universe of the stuff they don't want us to know about. And it's a small universe. Again, 98% of the stuff that you see, breaking news, it's stuff they're going to announce in 5 minutes anyway, and or that they otherwise either want us to know or aren't really bothered if we find out about it. As it relates to these report cards, they don't want us to know. And we will. One way or the other, we will. I'll try to get them. I'm sure my friend Pablo Toure will try to get them. Others will make it a priority to get them. And it's got a different feel now to it. It's got that forbidden fruit quality. They moved the needle as it was. And our first reaction at PFT when the NFL announced and overstated its victory, well, there went some good annual content that was very revealing about the way these teams operate and about how the players feel. Well, no, it's not gone. If anything, it's enhanced. The players will be galvanized. We already saw reaction on social media from guys like J.J. Watt, who was in the union, Cam Jordan, who is. Players are pissed. They feel like they're being silenced by the league, by owners who don't like to be criticized. People with money and power don't like other people calling them out. And the NFL thought they came up with a silver bullet to stifle that criticism. The reality is the criticism still exists. It will still be documented in the form of the report cards. And now it's just a question of one member of the union out of thousands to slip it under the door, however they see fit, whatever it takes to cover their tracks. It's going to be impossible for the NFL to figure out where the leak came from. Now, do I put it past them trying to muster an effort to track down the leak? Well, I hope they use some of that same energy to track down whoever leaked the John Gruden emails during the 2021 season, which resulted in him exiting his job as Raiders head coach during the season, undermining the integrity of the entire season. So use that same energy there, NFL, if you're going to try to track down the leaker inevitable of the NFLPA report cards. But that's where we are, and that's where it's going. The players are going to be more motivated to respond. They're going to be motivated to get the word out there because they know it bothers the owners. And it does. It does. It bothers the ones who aren't doing a good job of running their teams and who, in lieu of trying to improve, would rather just pull the plug on any effort to point the finger at what they're doing improperly. And one of the interesting twists in all of this, we wrote about it on Monday morning at PFT, a footnote in the opinion pointed out one of the arguments made in the hearing. Hey, the owners criticized players too. And even though there were no specific examples given in the ruling, you don't need to look very far. Remember in October, Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, calling out, criticizing publicly quarterback Justin Fields? And then more recently, Bills owner Terry Pegula, in a roundabout way, calling receiver Keon Coleman a bust because one of the issues in the decision to fire Sean McDermott and promote GM Brandon Beane, well, Beane's the one that drafted this guy who was inactive, healthy, scratch, multiple games last year, hasn't lived up to the potential. Pegula stepped in and said, well. That was the coaching staff that wanted Keon Coleman. So what the players need to do moving forward, anytime any one of them is publicly criticized by an owner, a GM, a coach, anyone from the team, file a grievance. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. The NFL started this. They pulled the pin on this grenade. So any and all public criticism by anyone connected to an NFL team should now result in an immediate Article 51 grievance, period. So that's what the NFL has gotten out of this. An empty win that doesn't end the report cards, that only will make the players more determined to participate. And the ruling notes that 80% of the players responded to this year's survey, highest ever. It'll be closer to 100 next time. So the NFL has found a problem, made it worse, and at the same time swung the door open on grievances to be filed against it in the event, inevitable possibly, that owners, coaches, GMs publicly criticize players. So that's where we are. Now, we'll see what happens next, because this may become one of the things that the league views as a non-negotiable at the bargaining table whenever they convene with the next executive director of the NFLPA, and the NFL may want this to go away. They may want language in there that is stronger, that prevents the report cards. And the question becomes, what are you going to give up to get it? Because it's now clear the owners don't like it. So if they want it to go away, they're going to have to give something up. And embedded within that question is how many owners truly don't like it. There was reporting when the grievance was first filed that this comes from a small handful of loud owners who don't like being criticized. They insisted that this grievance be filed. And the ones who don't care, all right, go ahead, have fun, knock yourself out. You do you. If they try now, that minority, that vocal minority of owners who don't like the report cards, to legislate away the report cards as part of the next CBA, some of the other owners may say, no, we're not paying the price for your dysfunction. We're not giving the union some significant concession so you can hide and not be criticized in these report cards. But it's not over. The 2026 report cards, if history holds, they'll be released at or about the time of the scouting combine, at the latest when the union has its annual meeting in March. And all it takes is one. And I'm easy to find. Anyone out there, Florio at profootballtalk.com. All inquiries anonymous. I'll protect your identity. I'll go to jail if I have to, if I'm put on the witness stand and forced to give up my source. Part of me would kind of like to do that once, to be forced to give up a source and say no. And I don't know, it's free food. Probably not very good, but what the hell? Can do some push-ups and sit-ups, and chill for a week or so, and read a few books, write a few books, and get back to it. All right. Also, within that little mini galaxy of NFL legal issues, this is something that I wish more people was paying attention to. And really, for as long as I've been doing this, when I first became aware of the NFL's habit of forcing any and all claims made by employees. Now, the players are in a separate category. They operate within the confines of their union. There's a CBA. Disputes are resolved through a process other than, for the most part, the commissioner having final say. For some specific things, the commissioner has preserved the ability to have final say. But for the most part, if an employee has a grievance to make and that employee is a player, there's a process, a procedure, and someone who is independent, sort of jointly hired by the league and the union, jointly paid by the league and the union. That's the person that resolves it. For anyone who isn't a player, what the NFL typically does, not always, Jim Trotter was an exception and got a settlement and coincidentally retired after he got his settlement after filing a wrongful termination case against NFL Network, which at the time was owned and operated by the NFL. But for most non-player employees, specifically coaches, general managers, front office people, anybody that's got to sign a contract with a team, they put language in there that not only requires them to take any claims they may have to arbitration, but makes the commissioner or his designee the person who resolves the case. And it would be great if we all lived in a world where any legal claims we ever were involved in, we had the right to be the judge, right? My neighbor's got a problem with my fence. Fence is too high. Oh, by virtue of the arbitration provision in the residential agreement, I'm the one who decides it. That's the way the NFL's done it. The commissioner was pressed by Jarrett Bell of USA Today during his Super Bowl press conference 2 weeks ago today about the commissioner's power over these cases. And the commissioner's response was basically, it was like that when I got here. That doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it good. And the point is, thanks to Brian Flores and Steve Wilkes and Ray Horton and also John Gruden, in those two separate cases, because remember, Flores filed his lawsuit against the league and several teams, and then Wilkes and Horton joined in. Gruden in late 2021, after he was pushed out by the Raiders didn't want to push him out, but the leak of those emails put everyone in an untenable situation, and Gruden had to go. Gruden sued the league and the commissioner for basically taking him out, for taking those supposedly confidential emails, leaking them to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times with the goal of pushing him out. In both cases, they've won so far on the issue of whether or not the claims go to the NFL's secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration presided over by the commissioner or his designee, or they're resolved in open court. And as to Gruden, this wasn't clear. I found this out on Friday afternoon. When Gruden threw what was essentially a Hail Mary pass in the Nevada Supreme Court and won and obtained a ruling that his case will be litigated in open court, the NFL didn't appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. They gave up on that one. They surrendered. And I think they did because they know they put together a flimsy, disingenuous argument under the NFL's constitution and bylaws to try to force the arbitration. And it had worked through the first level of the appeal process. The Nevada Supreme Court, with 3 judges, 2 of the 3 agreed with the league. Gruden petitioned for a rehearing by the full court and won. And the NFL surrendered. But the bigger issue is the Flores case. Because what happened last year, the appeals court, known formerly as the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, they issued a ruling that attacks the whole process as unfair, as unconscionable. You can't have a situation like this where the CEO of the company is the person who's the judge in any disputes that may be initiated by the employees. And I've said for years, why does the commissioner even want to do this? Why do you want to put yourself in a position where you know you can't be fair? You're making decisions that could impact in a negative way the people who have hired you and the people who pay you. Are you really going to be fair even if you want to be? Do you really want to tiptoe through that minefield? Well, if you take the position that we'll get to where we want to be on the other side of this maze, however it takes to get there, and there's so much. This is one of the things I learned in law school. I was young, I was dumb, as opposed to old and dumb, but I was naive. I thought the law was more mechanical and formulaic than it is, and it's not. There's a lot of play in the joints. It's malleable. You can get to where you want to go. It's just a matter of how you draw the maze. And if you can draw the maze from the facts to the outcome in a plausible way, you can get there. And that's the power the commissioner had. Whatever case, whatever the facts, whatever the circumstances, the commissioner had the power to make his way through the maze to get to the outcome that his employers would want. That's why it's a bad system. So the point is this. Thanks to Flores and Wilkes and Horton, and thanks to Gruden, the NFL's arbitration system is dead, or close to it. The last remaining hope is the petition for appeal that the league has filed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, first, they got to take it up. If they don't take it up, it's not resolved sea to shining sea, because you'll have, and I don't want to get too technical, but the country is broken up into a variety of circuits that are responsible for multiple states. You could have one circuit that says this thing's no good. You could have another circuit that says this is perfectly fine. Until the U.S. Supreme Court takes up the issue and bangs the gavel, and at least 5 of the 9 U.S. Supreme Court justices say, no, you can't do this, the NFL is still going to try to do it. So in a roundabout way, it would actually be good for the players, the employees, and really just anyone who's interested in fair and impartial justice being done, for the Supreme Court to take up the Flores case and ultimately rule against the NFL. If the Supreme Court just doesn't take up the case, it's not fully and completely resolved, but all of this becomes useful in what should be an ongoing attack. Every time an employee has a claim and the NFL's first line of defense is, sorry, you can't take it to court. We're going to file a motion to compel arbitration. You got a stronger argument now because there are more and more courts who are finally realizing that this is not the way to do business. And the solution is simple because the companies that have discovered over the last 25 or 30 years that there's a way to engineer the court system so that you can avoid it under the Federal Arbitration Act, you get your employees, you get your customers, you get anyone who might ever sue you to agree to go to arbitration. Those arbitrations get farmed out to one of the various companies that provide arbitration services. And my own experience has been those arbitration companies tend to find for the company. They tend to find for the entities that have created this little mini industry where private judicial services are available because the companies are the ones that set this up. And also, and this is one of the reasons why big companies want arbitration. If you can get your case in the hands of a judge, a lawyer, one person who is going to be committed to strictly applying the law, you got less of a chance of a group of jurors who may not understand the law, but just have a visceral sense that this person got screwed. So we're going to find whatever we have to find to come to the conclusion that the employee wins and the company loses. Big companies hate to be accountable to a jury. They hate it because a lot of what they do, even if you can say it's legally proper, it's just fundamentally unfair. And juries see through that, and juries don't like that. And as a result, the NFL and other big companies don't like juries. So my point is this. That's all the NFL has to do. Just have the same language in the contracts and remove the part that says the commissioner resolves the arbitration and pick any of the groups out there, the American Arbitration Association, to name one. There's more than one. Pick one. That's who handles the case. The NFL doesn't even want to do that. Well, they may have to. And at the end of the day, it's not going to change things very much, but it at least takes this power away from the commissioner. Power he should never want, power he should have never had, power that no commissioner of any sports league, no CEO of any business should ever have. So good news for justice, good news for the employees of the NFL and its teams who aren't players. This arbitration system the NFL has insisted on for decades is dead or dying, and it needs to. It needs to. The Miami Dolphins aren't taking President's Day off. They are busy, and their activities for now are focusing upon moving on from several key players as the new regime settles in. John Eric Sullivan, the new GM, Jeff Hafley, the new head coach, making decisions that, for the most part, were expected, especially as it relates to the biggest one so far. Receiver Tyreek Hill was always going to be cut by the Miami Dolphins this year. $35 million in salary, none of it's guaranteed, $5 million roster bonus due on the third day of the league year. He was going to be cut even without the serious knee injury he suffered on September 29 in the Monday night game against the Jets, even without the firing of GM Chris Greer, the firing of Coach Mike McDaniel. This was going to happen. If he had remained healthy last year, he likely would have been traded before the deadline to one of the contending teams that would have gotten a boost from Hill's arrival. The Chiefs were a team that were kind of lurking as a possible destination. Obviously, once he was injured, that was that. And the question of his health will continue to loom over his status. But for now, the key is the Dolphins have released him, but he's a free agent now for the first time in his career. And it creates an interesting possibility for a team that is looking to upgrade at the position. His health is going to be an issue, and his contract may include some protections for the team that signs him against him not becoming fully healthy. We've seen that with other contracts where bonus money is tied to passing a physical. He may have enough leverage that he can avoid that. Last year, Chris Godwin, when the Patriots wanted him badly, the Buccaneers signed him to a contract that had no expectation of health, had no triggers that would tie his guaranteed money to passing a physical. So Hill may be in a great position depending upon the number of teams that come out of the woodwork to try to get him. The Chiefs are going to be the first candidate. Eric Bieniemy's back as the offensive coordinator. There's this vibe that they're trying to get the gang back together again. There's already an increased likelihood that tight end Travis Kelce will return simply because Bieniemy is back. Hill comes back too. Patrick Mahomes, who has the torn ACL, he'll surely be ready to go by week 1. He's determined to get there. The Chiefs make a ton of sense. They made sense during the season last year for a trade. They're going to make sense now that he's free and clear and able to return to the team he was traded away from 4 years ago. But there's going to be other teams. Where's Mike McDaniel now? Oh, he's the Chargers offensive coordinator. That's spicy. That's one of the things the Chargers need desperately. They need some help at the receiver position. They need weapons for Justin Herbert. Tyreek Hill, even though he's going to be 32 on March 1, and even with the health concern, let's assume that he's going to do everything he can to get healthy. Let's assume he's going to be diminished somewhat. He's still Tyreek Hill. He's still going to be better than anything the Chargers currently have. Let's stay in the division. What about the Broncos? They could use someone like Tyreek Hill to get that offense to a higher level. What about the Patriots? They could use someone like Tyreek Hill to supercharge their offense. And then you got the Ravens. And here's the added benefit with the Ravens. Remember 2023 when the Ravens were in that awkward contract status with Lamar Jackson? What did they do? They signed Odell Beckham Jr. and they gave him like $15 million guaranteed. Like it was a number that no one else was going to pay, but it had an added benefit. It got the deal done with Lamar Jackson. Maybe adding Tyreek Hill is the thing that gets Lamar Jackson to sign the contract the Ravens would have on the table in lieu of pushing for something more. So they're going to be in play, potentially. The Steelers could be in play. They've got DK Metcalf and what? Calvin Austin III, no offense, he's not Tyreek Hill. Look at a team like the Packers. They're looking to upgrade at the receiver position, as they should be. There's going to be a lot of teams out there. Even the Seahawks. What do the Seahawks have across from Jackson Smith and Jigba? I mean, Cooper Kupp had key plays in the postseason, and he had a lot to do with the Seahawks getting to the Super Bowl. But talk about Tyreek Hill. Even with the knee injury, even with the birthday that's coming up, he's still dangerous. And again, we expected this. This is not a surprise. This has been coming. But now it's here. And now we find out. And it will start in earnest at the scouting combine, if not sooner. Tyreek Hill will be, I believe, in demand. Because if someone can get Tyreek Hill and he's healthy, Tyreek Hill can make a difference for plenty of teams out there that have had something less than Tyreek Hill at the receiver position in recent years. And he could end up being a difference maker in 2026. Is it a long-term answer? No. Is it a very viable 1 or 2 year fix, a boost for a team that's trying to grab the brass ring? Hell yes. So another interesting wrinkle to the postseason, or the offseason, that will play out in the coming days and weeks. All right, some other things. Oh, this is an NBA issue. And it's come to a head in recent days. The tanking problem. And tanking's an issue for both the NBA and the NFL. It's just more of a problem in the NBA. There's more games. The teams that have no chance, they know it sooner. And then when you've got a year where there are desirable incoming players, and apparently this year there are 3 must-have players who are in the draft pool, some teams are going to try to not win games. They're going to sit healthy players, load management, or whatever other excuse they'll give. And last week, the NBA busted 2 of the teams, the Utah Jazz, $500,000, the Indiana Pacers, $100,000 in fines for not playing healthy players. And Adam Silver had a press conference on Saturday in conjunction with the All-Star weekend, and he acknowledged the basic problem, and it applies to the NBA and the NFL. The incentives are misaligned because in theory, you have an incentive to win every single game you play, whether you're a contender for a championship or not. That's how they want it to be. They want the integrity to be pure. They want the competition to be unquestioned. In every given game, in any given game, both teams are trying their damnedest to win. That's what they're selling. And that becomes more important in an age of widespread, legalized, normalized, and highly profitable gambling. You need people to think that every game is on the up and up, that no one has any motivation other than to win. But if you're thinking about the future, and Adam Silver laid it all out. See, the NFL will never even talk about this. Their approach is pretend that the incentives aren't misaligned. They have a firewall between what it means to be really bad and what it means to parade around as the team that holds the top pick in the draft. Because the draft for the NFL has become this all-encompassing, ultimate traveling reality show about nothing. They could do it by group text. They've turned it into this thing that's going to draw hundreds of thousands of people, and they fudge the numbers. We'll talk about that more when they start saying how many hundreds of thousands attended the draft in Pittsburgh, just like they did it last year and just like they'll do it every year, because they want to make it seem like a bigger deal than it is, so it continues to become a bigger deal. I better get to the draft. It's a pilgrimage. Oh, the draft is only 100 miles away. I better go. I better go to the draft. Everybody who's anybody is going to the draft. And they've made it something so big that it's unassailable. And the one potentially fatal flaw is the reality that someone could engage in tanking so blatant and so obvious that it will lead to consequences, whether it's congressional investigation, legislation, regulation, prosecution, litigation, whatever it may be. Because the fundamental problem, and this issue has kind of broken through to mainstream. I saw somebody on one of the cable news channels this weekend making the argument that there should be a racketeering investigation of the NBA teams that aren't trying to win, because the whole premise of gambling is both teams in every game are trying to win. But that's out there. That's out there. And yes, am I the only one that is banging this drum? I don't know. Maybe. But I'm going to keep banging it, because I feel like the NFL right now, and the NBA may be in this same boat. I don't know. I don't cover it. The game, I think, is make as much money as possible from gambling. And what's coming next? Prediction markets. Make as much money as you can before the reckoning inevitably arrives. Delay the reckoning as long as you can. But until then, you'll make as much money as you can, and you'll deal with the reckoning when it comes. And when the reckoning comes, it won't be nearly as bad as it should be, given everything we've done before the reckoning. I mean, that's basically what's gone on in college sports. That's the current chaos in college sports in a nutshell. The universities under the umbrella of the NCAA were able to delay the reckoning that they need to pay the players for decades. And the house caved in a few years ago. And of course now, oh, it's someone else's fault, not ours, that we had these antitrust violations that deprived the players of fair payment for years and years and years and years. So it'll be different, but similar when the reckoning comes for the NFL, the NBA, and gambling. They'll act surprised. They'll blame someone else. And at the end of the day, the reality is they ignored the problem because they were making too much money. And there's only one way to fix this. I wrote this yesterday at PFT. You have to make sure that the incentives aren't misaligned. You have to remove the incentive to tank. And I don't know the right way to do it. There are easy ways to do it. You tie the draft order to a straight lottery, top to bottom. Every team's in it with an equal shot to have the first overall pick in the draft. Put that on TV. See how that does in prime time on a 3-letter network. Are you kidding me? The NFL draft lottery with all 32 teams having an equal shot at the top pick. But that's the only way to take a team like the Raiders, who they shut down Max Crosby with a couple of games left, even though he thought he could still play. Coincidentally, they needed to lose in order to win the ability to draft Fernando Mendoza or trade that pick for plenty of other draft picks in an effort to make their team better. So that's an easy way to do it. Some have suggested that the Super Bowl champion should have the first pick in the draft. Now, that completely goes against this idea, and this is where the whole thing comes from. We want to have competitive balance. So how do we create competitive balance? We give the worst team first shot at the next crop of incoming players, and we work our way down accordingly. And one of the reasons I think the NFL doesn't have a draft lottery, they just don't want to acknowledge in any way, directly or indirectly, that there's ever an incentive to tank. So if we never have a draft lottery, which in and of itself would be incredibly profitable and would generate millions of eyeballs if it was just like the NBA's current draft lottery, that's why they won't do it. They want to keep us from realizing the connection between losing and winning as it relates to the draft. And this isn't going away. They need a solution. They need to revolutionize the process in order to ensure that in every single game, both teams will be trying to win. There's never any consideration. And the people who argue against tanking, oh, no player is ever going to go out and try to lose a game. That's not how it works. Someone higher up on the food chain makes the decision that we want to evaluate the backup quarterback. We want to see how these young players perform under the guise of we put the lesser players on the field and nature takes its course. Hell, we've lost plenty of games with our best players. Let's put our lesser players out there and we can ease in to the parking spot of one of the top picks in the draft. And just look at what teams give up to move a few spots in the top 10. There's value. There's real value in being bad. And as I've said time and again, who really remembers if you were 4-13 or 3-14 or 2-15? If you don't make the playoffs, it doesn't matter. So why not be as bad as you can be in the hopes of being good in the future? It's a simple economic proposition. Adam Silver acknowledged that. Analytics are involved. There is a reason to not try to win. We just need to take that away. And there'll still be a draft, although I don't think there should be. That's a different topic for a different day. And I think the NFL would be fine without one. But you just have to come up with a different way to figure out picks 1 through 32, because the current way is leaving the door open for a major problem that will undermine the integrity of the game and that will cause all sorts of expenses and worry and consequences for the people who are involved in whatever the first big scandal is as it relates to tanking. All right, speaking of the Raiders. They've promoted Rob Leonard to be defensive coordinator, and he's close to Max Crosby, and maybe this is just part of the effort to convince Crosby that he doesn't want out, even though, as we said last week, it's probably a good time for the Raiders to trade him, maximize what they get while he's still got some years left in his prime, because by the time they turn this thing around, he's probably going to be beyond his prime, although that guy's determination is so absolute. Who knows? Who knows how long his prime will last? But this would be a good time for them to trade him, but they seem to want to keep him. So Rob Leonard now the defensive coordinator. And that happened not long after I pointed out at PFT on Saturday that there's still this thing percolating in league circles about Jim Schwartz, who resigned a couple of weeks ago as defensive coordinator of the Browns, just walked away, submitted a resignation letter and walked away. That he was still in play for the Raiders, that the Raiders kind of wanted him and he kind of wanted them, but the Browns hold his rights and the Browns haven't hired a defensive coordinator yet either. And could he pull a Costanza and, after the Browns hire their defensive coordinator, show up and say, hey, I never quit. I want to come back. Deal with me. Put me back on the coaching staff. Now, based upon the people I've talked to since Rob Leonard was promoted to defensive coordinator, I've heard different opinions about this. But there is still a belief, and really, it's not all that crazy to think that Schwartz could still end up with the Raiders. Assistant head coach defense, senior defensive assistant, something. They could still try to land him if and when the Browns release his rights. And I just think Schwartz is too damn smart to give up, to cry uncle and walk away. If he wants a coach this year, there's a way to try to pull it off. And the simplest thing to do once the Browns name a new defensive coordinator is to say, I'm back, baby. I'm back. So it's just something I'm going to keep an eye on. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it would be foolish to not keep an eye on this because there's just enough there to make you say, is this really over? Is this really done? Are the Browns playing checkers while Jim Schwartz is playing chess? Let's see how it plays out. I'd be surprised, though, if he willingly sits out the entire 2026 season without pay. We'll see. One last point before we wrap this up. The Seahawks and Raiders both have new offensive coordinators, and this is a critical hire for the Seahawks. They initially were interviewing and focusing on their internal candidates, and that makes sense because Clint Kubiak becomes the head coach of the Raiders. You've got people on the staff who can help create continuity. And that's important because Mike Macdonald, the head coach of the Seahawks, is a defensive guy. You need somebody who can continue this relationship with Sam Darnold and build upon it. That's been short-circuited. The guy that got the most out of Darnold last year is gone. So we find somebody on the staff, promote that person, and we hope it works better than it did for the Lions after Ben Johnson left and John Morton was promoted from within. Ultimately, the Seahawks hired Brian Florio, who most recently was the run game coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, and he was in San Francisco the year that Darnold was there. So they've made the assessment, they've made the decision that this is going to be better for them than whatever continuity would come from promoting someone from within. And again, it is a critical decision, and it's got a potential reward for Florio. Look at what it did for Kubiak. You get a team. Remember when the Seahawks had like a bad offensive line every year? When a team's got a good offensive line, not great. When the offensive line is dominant, they become the talk of the league. But when you just have a good offensive line, nobody ever talks about it. The Seahawks have a good offensive line now. Not dominant, because we're not saying, oh, this is one of the best offensive lines we've ever seen. But it's also not as bad as it once was. So they've got the line. They've got the quarterback. They've got the receivers, specifically Jackson Smith and Jigba, the 2025 NFL Offensive Player of the Year. They may have Kenneth Walker, the third back. They have to make a decision about him. And even without him, they'll draft another Kenneth Walker a lot cheaper than what it would be to pay Kenneth Walker either the franchise tag salary or the amount of a long-term deal. But you look at how good the Seahawks are. This is an easy stepping stone for Brian Florio to be a guy who gets hired as a head coach next year. It's a desirable job. And the Seahawks made that decision. We need to go outside for this one. We need maybe some fresh ideas. It's not about trying to replicate what Clint Kubiak did necessarily. It's about having that relationship that we trust between coordinator and quarterback so they can get more out of Sam Darnold in year 2 and continue that development. But this is why I always say, and I typically apologize in advance to all the defensive coaches out there, if you've got a good quarterback, you want a head coach who's an offensive mind, because you want to continue to let that relationship between the quarterback and the most important member of the coaching staff to the quarterback grow, evolve, develop over time. That's why the Patriots have it so good. Mike Vrabel, defensive guy. Josh McDaniels, 2-time head coach. Not a single sniff this year. He's sticking around. Now, another year or two of development of Drake May, if the Patriots continue to be a high-level contender, maybe Josh McDaniels gets a third shot. But if McDaniels had never been a head coach before, he'd be gone. He'd have gotten one of these jobs. So there's value in knowing that your play caller, your play designer, your quarterback whisperer is going to be sticking around. The Seahawks have to go through that transition. And with Florio being hired by the Seahawks, Andrew Janocko goes from the Seahawks to the Raiders with Clint Kubiak to try to do with whoever their quarterback is going to be what they did last year with Sam Darnold. Whether it's Geno Smith, whether it's Fernando Mendoza, whether it's someone else, whether it's Smith for a year with Mendoza learning, whatever it may be, the Seahawks are putting the Raiders, are putting the infrastructure in place to turn things around. And who knows what's going to happen with the Raiders. They've had 2 playoff appearances since Super Bowl 37. One and done in each one, although they did give the Bengals hell in the 2021 wildcard round, the year that the Bengals almost beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. They just have a lot to do. They don't have enough great players. They focus too much on building from the outside in, not the inside out. They need to focus on the offensive line, the defensive line. Beyond Max Crosby, what do they really have? They need more. They just need more great players. And we'll see how they go about finding those great players. If they can't keep Max Crosby, get draft picks, use them well. try to develop great players that way. Maybe they decide not to draft Mendoza and trade that pick. We don't know. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. We can't rule out anything as free agency approaches, as the new league year creeps closer, as trades can happen. And remember, trades can be unofficially done at any time. They just can't become official until the new league year starts on March 11th. We're in that window where we have to be ready for anything. And when you consider how crazy January was, there's really nothing that can happen by way of player movement. Well, I mean, there are a few things like Patrick Mahomes being traded would be beyond crazy. And I'm not suggesting he would be. I'm just saying that's an example of something that would be, holy crap, that's impossible. But beneath the obviously, clearly untouchable, not going anywhere players, anything's possible as it relates to draft picks, as it relates to players, as it relates to anything. And that's why there never is a slow time in the NFL. That's why we're going to be here all week for PFT PM. That's why you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We'll be back on that wall, or as the case may be, in the Olive Garden alternate set on Tuesday for another edition of PFT PM, when there will inevitably be many more things to discuss in and around the National Football League. Have a great Monday, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.